It is a teacher's job to be liked, and building rapport is a skill that can be taught but isn't taught. When you're learning to be a teacher, nowhere in the curriculum do they teach you a skill set so that we can help clients, students, colleagues, team members. We need to know how to build rapport so that we can influence people in a positive way.
From encouraging her students to follow their dreams to having the courage and confidence to follow her own. As the founder of the Mind School, she shares within this episode her story, her thoughts and reflections with such passion that'll inspire you to follow your dreams. So sit back, get comfy and listen to the phenomenal conversation I had the immense privilege to have with the extraordinary and remarkable Breanna May.
If quality of relationships equals a fulfilling life, that leads me to believe that if the education system prioritised emotional intelligence, that people would have more life satisfaction.
Breanna, welcome to Share.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very honoured to be here and excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it as well. I've tracked you a little bit on social media and you're doing some amazing things. So looking forward to, diving in and kind of unpacking some of your journey, some of your story, and also all the cool things that you're doing and the impact you're making to people's lives.
Yeah, thank you. Let's get into it.
Yeah, awesome. So give me a snapshot. What's the story of Breanna May?
I feel like there's so many ways I could answer this question.
Yep. The
story of Breanna May is that I feel like I spent my 20s being perpetually frustrated that I hadn't found my thing, and feeling this expectation that I should know the thing. I should know what to do with my life. I should have it all sorted out specifically by the time I'm 30. And 30 was that magical number in my head that, I should have life figured out. And I was the person that graduated high school. And I was thinking about this actually today. I remember, you're 16, 17 years old, and they're like, you need to really think about what you want to do for the rest of your life, because you've got to put your priorities in order, and that's what you'll do at university, and that's your life. And I remember I graduated, and over the summer, I changed from musical theatre to law to psychology to journalism to advertising to teaching, all before I'd even started. And that's pretty much how my 20s went. I started in a law firm, and then I went into journalism, and then I miraculously, but also kind of accidentally, fell into teaching. And I felt frustrated the whole time until I sort of realized that everything that I dabbled into was leading the way for where I am now. And that was building a business, which really, it teaches mindset and emotional intelligence. But I had to sort of go the long way to get there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. My son is finishing year 12, I can't believe, but finishing grade 12, and it's an interesting time of the year because obviously as people are kind of approaching their futures, I think there's a really important message there that you don't actually need to leave school knowing what you want to do, what your life's going to entail. You just need to know that you can feel drawn to things, and also drop the expectations of what your parents, your teachers, your friends, your family think that you should do.
That's a conversation. Like I said, I accidentally but miraculously ended up high school teaching, and that was my passion. And I really loved the year 11s and 12s for this reason. They get to that point, they're like, Miss, what should I do? And there's all this pressure, and so many beautiful conversations I got to have with these kids where I was like, actually, do all the things, change your mind a million times. And actually, if you live the same life every single year and call that a life, I would argue that you haven't really lived. So go and try all the things. And yeah, there was such a beautiful, but then that also fueled my sort of frustration with the education system. I really felt like we were putting kids in boxes and we were putting expectations on them, for our own, I guess the education system had its own agenda. The schools all have their own agenda. And I felt like we were really pushing IQ as opposed to EQ. And the more research I've done and the more I've grown my business and gone down this path, I think if we had a society or an education system where we fostered these kinds of conversations and giving kids the resilience to try new things and the courage to do things outside of the box and the courage to do the things that they're interested in, even if it's not, fitting inside a box. I think if we had those conversations and we fostered emotional intelligence, the studies and all of the research actually suggest that people would have more life satisfaction. And so, yeah, it was really throughout that time that I was like, I don't want to work in this system anymore.
So talk to me and let listeners know, some may not know, but what's the difference between IQ and EQ?
So if we look at IQ, it really is your thinking, your intellect, your ability to, it's what the academic system is. It's our ability to perform in that way using our logic and our mind and our thinking, which is beautiful, incredible, amazing. Our EQ is our emotional intelligence, and our emotional intelligence is our ability to regulate our emotions, to understand our emotions, and therefore to be able to understand everybody else and foster really meaningful relationships. And what I find so interesting is that one of the longest studies that's ever been done on human potential and human happiness, it was this study that was done, and I think it went over like 7 generations, 70 years or something. I think you might have, do you know, I can't remember what it's actually called. It evades me now. But anyway, it got passed on by professor and another professor because they kept dying, because this is how long the study went for. And they were tracking and asking the question, what is the thing that leads to somebody at the end of their life reflecting that they had a fulfilling life, a life, where they're not on their deathbed with regret? And I love this kind of study, this kind of conversation. And the answer was quality of relationships, not quantity, but quality. And if quality of relationships equals a fulfilling life, that leads me to believe that's something that we need to really be teaching, fostering, because not only does quality relationships equal a more fulfilling life, it's going to make, and this is what the studies all suggest now, which is why I'm on my high horse saying the education system needs to really prioritize EQ, because it also makes you more willing to go for things in the workplace. It makes you more satisfied in your work because you do meaningful work, because you are able to regulate and understand your emotions. So it creates a more satisfying career as well as personal relationships outside of our work. And to me, that's just so important. And for business owners too, I say EQ is like the number one skill you need. So yeah, that was my long-winded, ranty way of explaining the difference. And what I want to add to it is there is a misconception that it's IQ over EQ or EQ not IQ, and it's this false polarity, this false dichotomy. But all the evidence suggests that when you foster EQ, emotional intelligence, when you build that skill set, IQ can go up too. And I saw that so many times in the education system, really, high performing students who are so intelligent, so bright, so many kids who I know knew the answers. Soon as they went into an exam situation, anxiety kicks in, mind goes blank, scores don't reflect their intellect. And it's not because they have low IQ, it's because their EQ wasn't in check.
Yeah. And see, as we get older and as you kind of go through challenges in life, which I've been through and you've been through and we all go through, the older you get, you actually work out that with every challenge you discover more about yourself. There's more self-reflection, there's more self-awareness. You work out how unique you really are and how unique we all are, and we're all very different, right? But when you look at the education system, they put everyone in the same room, on the same desk, in an exam environment, and it just made me think then, you're talking about, some people have anxiety. Well, what if someone's best environment would be sitting in nature doing their exam? What if their best environment is sitting near the beach doing their exam? Now, I know there's a lot of things that can kind of go with that, and it's hard to make that happen, but how to foster an environment where people can be themselves from a young age and follow what they are drawn to, be in the environment they're drawn to, rather than have to just deal with the environment they're given, is a really interesting topic.
It's so interesting, and it's obviously got that's a utopia, it's a utopia, but I can hear the logical and the, school principals and school executives going, yeah, nice, cool. Who's going to fund that kind of school? But truly, I've looked like Finland has got one of the best education systems in the world, and they're very play-based. They're very in nature. They don't do the standardized testing that's like a factory production center like we do. And there are ways to do it. There are real leaders and pioneers in the education space that are creating alternative ways to help kids nurture their individuality. So it can be done, and I still have hope. One day I dream, I make a joke, I dream that one day I'd like to be like Oprah and build schools all over the place. But
you've got a school. You've got a school. Everyone gets a school.
Yeah, everybody gets a school. And I built my own school in the form of my business. But what's really reassuring to me is also that a lot of parents come to me and they're like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, the system isn't helping my child, or I know that my kid's got so much more and they're not, all of these conversations that I have. And the coolest study that I ever read told us that parents are the number one influence in a kid's life. So regardless of whatever system the kid is in, or the teacher they have, or the peer group that they're hanging around, I thought it was really cool and really reassuring as a parent to know you are really the key influencer, and that's so empowering as a parent.
Yeah. Even though when you're going through the system as a parent, you're going through that timeline, you think they don't listen to you, but over time, like we've got 5 kids, I've got 3 stepchildren, and then we've got two kids together, and 15 and 17, one's just about to, as I said, finish year 12. But it's interesting because they come out with things and you go, oh yeah, who said that? They are listening, even though they don't want you to think or know that they actually listen to you. They do. And it really is about supporting your children to be who they want to be. Yes, we can try and cushion things, but they do need to learn their own lessons. I think one of the key things is, as well as that, for those that are listening to this episode that are maybe finishing school or at a point in their life where they're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like from a school perspective, I've never really looked at the marks on a report card for my boys. I've always looked at what type of person are they, because for me, and you were talking about recruitment and people that are hiring people into organizations, I prefer to look at what someone's like rather than what their qualifications is, because how someone is so much more important than what marks they got in school. Like people that are finishing school now, graduating, and they're going to be waiting for their uni kind of intakes and those kind of things. And there's going to be a number of different emotions out there. There's going to be some people sitting there going, I just wasted my whole school career. I failed. There's all this anxiety around it. And then there's going to be the people that are like, I smashed this. I'm like getting the right, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a doctor and those kind of things. And you've got people also like my 15-year-old, he's going into an industry school next year. So doing a lot more from a trade perspective, right? And I remember going to the races, 10 years after I graduated, and I caught up with a lot of my friends from school. And it was interesting because the lawyers and the engineers, some of them were still at university. They were still studying. Whereas the guys that were the trades, which in some cases you would think back then they were probably the drop kicks or the class clowns, right? Some of these guys had like crews of 10 or 12 people. Yeah. They had holiday homes, boats, jet skis. Yeah. They had the life, the family, the white picket fence. And you sit there and you go, but these other guys have got a hex deck the size of someone's mortgage and they haven't started their career yet, right? So it really shows me that it doesn't matter. You pave your own path. Like don't think you have to go down a path a certain way. Don't, even if you don't get the marks that you want at the end of year 12, you can go and do TAFE to get into the courses that you want. Like there's no, Like, it's not the be all or end all. And I think school can sometimes be like that. I think it's about just getting the kids through school, and I think supporting them to do what they want. And at the end of the day, most of the time they find their feet.
100%. And I think I'd love to say that the system's changing, but I actually think the system's gotten worse, and it's really devalued education, because there has been a shift where now I heard a lot of year 12s going, Miss, why on earth would I do ATAR? Like, why would I do the top set subjects when uni lets everyone in? And I was like, oh gosh. And that's kind of devaluing the beauty of learning. And so that's sad to me as an educator. But I think it's really interesting too. As you were talking, I was kind of reflecting too on what grades can mean for people. And I think the only thing that it can do in a really positive, not the only thing, but it can really help someone's confidence if they believe at an identity level, I'm intelligent, I can do hard things. If that helps them in their identity through life, brilliant, great. But when it's the opposite, and I still work with women and men who 30, 40, 50 years old are holding on to a narrative that I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm not creative, I'm XYZ because of some grade or some teacher's comment from school. And they don't realize that that's where they picked up the narrative. But that's where I have a bit of a concern about like this over importance of grades and scores and standardized tests, because it forms part of our narrative and our identity of who we are. And that sticks. It really sticks. I remember having a conversation with one of my clients who was a very successful photographer, very successful. And she still had this narrative, I'm not a creative person. And I just remember saying to her, whose voice is that? Where did you first hear that? She goes, year 10 art teacher. And I thought, wow, there's just so much power in the things that we hear in the classroom. And when our grades are the be all and end all of who we, of our identity at school, it can be empowering or disempowering. And that's where I sort of say we need to drop all of that emphasis on the grade.
Yeah. Yeah, and I talk about encouraging versus discouraging, because if you look at some of the people that have really succeeded in life, it comes from stories of discouragement. It comes from stories of their year 10 teacher saying, you're never going to amount to anything, or, someone like a relative or friend saying, oh, look, don't do that, and a lot of the things I've achieved in life, I've achieved because someone told me I couldn't.
Yeah, love that motivation. I'll show you. Yeah.
So it's an interesting point. Talk to me, Breanna, around if you could wave your wand and you could change the curriculum, what do you think some of the things or what are some of the gaps do you think in the current curriculum that you'd like to see change, especially in that kind of secondary schooling?
Oh, it's
Where
funny.
Do you start?
I've been asked this a little bit actually in the media lately, and my answer is actually that I want to strip the curriculum bare. It's so overcrowded. It's ridiculously, it's so crowded that the perspective as the educator is pump through it, just pump through it, pump through it, pump through it. We've got to get to the next thing, the next assessment, the next assessment, the next assessment, the next assessment. And there's no actual time for going, hey, this is where we could improve. Let's look at it. Let's improve, because that's what skill building is. And it's filled with so much irrelevant crap, to be honest, Steve. Like it's just, and the kids used to say to me all the time, Miss, like, how is this going to help me at like after school? And I was like, truly, it's not. Like, it's actually not. Quite honestly, I'm still thinking like, where was tax? Where was understanding profit and loss? Where was compounding? Where was financial literacy, emotional literacy? It wasn't there. I was learning the flute and Pythagoras, which I've never used ever again. It's stripping it
Algebra.
Algebra.
Like, I remember my maths teacher in like year 10, 11 and 12, and he's like, and I said, sir, why am I going to I'm not going to use this again, right? And he's like, you will use it one day. I saw him 10 years later, and I saw him 20 years later. And every time I see him, I say, sir, I got to tell you, still haven't used it.
Still not using it. And I was the kid at school that was like every report. If Breanna would just stop talking, if Breanna was just like a little bit less social, and now I literally my career is speaking, and so I'm like, well, there's something for everyone. But to the answer the question, I think stripping it back and literacy, numeracy, all of these skills so important. I'm not here to say they're not, but I think if we stripped it back to those and added things like mindset, emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, particularly, I'd love to see a little bit of financial literacy and things like that.
100%.
Because as someone who's now 33, I've got a business that's, it started to go really well. And I was like, fuck, what's a BAS statement? What do I do at tax time? I've just learned about compounding, and it's like, could have used that 10 years ago to really make it rock and roll. All of these lessons that I think, well, where was this education? So my dream would be to strip it right back, keep the basics that we actually need, and add, like I said, the emotional intelligence, because that takes us, I really believe that emotional regulation is crime prevention, it's addiction prevention, it's divorce prevention, it's depression prevention, it's anxiety prevention. And to me, that's what we're struggling with as a society. And as we've gotten more and more technological and ironically disconnected, I feel like we're living in this world where we're so, quote, connected, and yet loneliness has never been more of a pandemic. I really feel that there's this huge call to actual human connection, human skills, conversation skills, looking at people in the eye when you speak skills, vulnerable, all of that. Like, we really need it. And I worry about the direction that things are heading and the gaps that are not filled yet for young people.
There's a real disconnection. Yeah, we're the most connected society, but we're also the most disconnected, right? Relationships, friendships, and there's this pressure and expectation on everyone. And it is, I think the same thing, Breanna. I go, where are we heading? Like, where is this heading? Like, you've got a lot of the younger generation that are coming up, and they don't want to own businesses, and they don't want to do these things because they've seen their parents hit burnout and stress and divorce and separation and breakdowns and those kind of things. And they're like, no, I'm just going to travel, and I'm just going to live in Bali, right? Like, and it's going to be an interesting world moving forward. But I think there's a lot more around connecting now, right? Like, you're doing a lot of stuff in your space. I've attended some men's retreats in America with Chris Robbins and his Soul Degree movement, and I'm going to run some men's retreats this way. And it's really about disconnecting. Like, over there, we went and walked on, like, for 3 of the 5 days, we went and walked on parts of the Appalachian Trail, and we were sitting around campfires, and we were like picking cards and answering random questions and talking about what actually really means the most to us, right? Like, disconnecting from digital, because when you're out in Vermont, there's not, in the middle of, kind of the forest, there isn't really much technology, right? And we're having cold plunge and ice baths, and we're walking the tracks and just being, right? And the power of that, especially from a male perspective, and I know I think females do it a lot better.
Yeah.
I think in yoga and some of those things, but I think from a male perspective, a lot of men's groups now and a lot of these groups that have been put in place are still, the central part of it is, let's go and drink and let's go and, do blokey stuff. But like, the real power comes from actually, who am I? Because I think a lot of us guys kind of hold this generational pressure of, what does my dad, my grandfather, what does the older generation expect me to be? Who am I supposed to be based on their expectations? And, some of the conversations, and I won't go into it in detail, but some of the conversations I have with a lot of these men is that their dads didn't tell them they loved them. They can't remember affection or anything like that. And for me, I hug my kids, right? Like, and I make sure that I'm kind of shifting that and kind of I'm breaking that cycle, because I want to be seen as a different dad to my dad and my granddad, even though they've got brilliant, kind of qualities and values. It's pushed me to be a different father, because I know, like from a male and female perspective, the love of a parent and a care and a support of the parent is massively important. And I think you see people in life that are going through struggles, and you can almost see and kind of, it's a bit of a stereotype, but you can almost sit there and go, she wasn't loved by her parents, or he wasn't loved by his parents. He had a troubled upbringing, and that trauma. And as you said, similar to a year 10 teacher saying something to someone, we hold on to that, especially in that, when you're born to you're kind of 7 years old. It's those years there, some of the things that are ingrained into you almost subconsciously that you don't even know until you get into your 30s and 40s and you go, oh, wow.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's something in the quote, a quote from the Bible, or I can't remember where it's from, and it says, "Show me a child their first 7 years and I will tell you the man he will become." And it's incredible, and it really speaks to those programming years, before the amygdala and the thinking brain, and that I always call it the gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper is our ability to go, wait, hold on, do I accept that thought? And the gatekeeper is our conscious thinking brain, which can say, I actually disagree and I'm not going to take that on, or I reject that thought, that's not mine. In the first 7 years, we're just a sponge. And actually, it's when we're in utero, it's crazy, like the epigenetics of it too. It's even before we're born. It's when we're in utero. It's when we're in the eggs that we're not even, we're not a human yet. We're picking up so much conditioning. And those first 7 years, I agree with you. I don't know if there's a single person I've worked with, that hasn't had some form of like, my mum didn't have the skills to love me, or my dad didn't have the ability to show that unconditional love. And again, I think this is an emotional intelligence situation. This is a thing. And I've never had so many requests to do courses for men, and it's intensified this last couple years.
Yep.
And I've sat with it and I've struggled with it, honestly, because I'm not a male, and I honestly, like, I get it, but I'm not a male. I don't know. I can't resonate with that pressure of, toughen up, man up, you'll be okay. That real strong masculine conditioning. But I lost a male friend actually this year to suicide. And I sat there when I got the news and I thought, the answer is emotional intelligence. The answer is emotional regulation. The answer is building the skill set, because it's a skill set that's not taught for most of us, because our parents don't have the skills to teach. Our parents don't have that toolkit, so how can they possibly pass it on? And I think what you're doing with your sons is like it's the ultimate breaking the cycle, but it really hurts my heart to think that there's men out there who want the skills but don't know where to get it, or don't even know that there is another way. And so I really believe that the work to do to change this trajectory and to help with the mental health statistics it's emotional intelligence. And like I said, this is why I left the education system. This is why I built my business, because IQ is great. But how many of us do we know, or how we can think of someone who did all the right things, got the fancy degree, built the incredible 7-figure business, or got rich and famous and was all smart and shiny, but depressed on the inside? And to me, I just think, what's the point? What's the point in all of that if internally you don't have the resources to connect?
Yeah. And I think my experience with, going to Soul Degree and a couple of men's retreats, one in Arizona this year and one in Vermont last year, one of the key things I found is that the difference between those men's retreats and some of the men's groups that I've kind of also been part of over the years is that, language and the dialogue that happens in those groups and the environments that they put themselves in, because I think men mask their pain, their inadequacy, feeling inadequate. They mask all this by comments and dialogue and what they think they need to say, and they need to kind of show up as this person and put this mask on. But like really they're screaming out to take the mask off and show the real mask, because if they can actually deal with that mask and they can actually unlock like vulnerability, like it's a superpower, right? Like they can, for me, I've been through some really, really tough times over the last kind of 7 years, but I'm stronger now because I've been through those things, and I help mentor some guys now, and I want to put on more men's retreats because, I just know that there's such a need out there to actually connect. And you talked about the power of human connection, and the power of human connection from a male perspective, where you can actually say to another male, I love you, mate, right? Like, and not be like, oh, you sissy or like whatever it is, right? Like, no, like we've got an online community through Soul Degree, which Chris runs, and just posting videos, and it's always about, oh, I love your brother, and it's knowing that there's people there, whether they're next to you down the road or across the other side of the world, that you can pick up the phone to have a conversation with, and they get you. And I think from a male perspective and also from a female perspective, but we're running through life sometimes and we just don't feel acknowledged. We don't feel understood. We just don't feel like we fit in a lot of the time. But if we find our tribe and we actually feel like we can fit in, we can be ourselves, that's where the power is.
I totally agree. And I guess that's the light side to the online space, is that you can find your tribe now, and it has gotten more accessible to find your tribe. I think it's that real balance of using it in a productive way and then knowing when to disconnect so that you can actually connect.
Yep. So talk to me about the Mind School and how it started. What, obviously you've touched on a little bit what inspired you to start it, but what kind of moved you from idea, concept to actual reality?
Well, a long 4 years of trial and error and fucking it up, if I'm quite honest, and doing all the things that was my ego, working from my ego, and then realizing, oh shit, this isn't what my soul wants. So when I left teaching, I always had the dream. It's so ironic. I left teaching because I missed teaching. And I knew I loved teaching. It was my favorite thing in the world, but it was the connection and the rapport that you have with students and the relationships you get to build with them. And honestly, I think if it weren't for the system being so broken, I'd probably still be there, because those students are so much love for that job. But I missed teaching. And so when I left, I thought, I want to teach what matters. I want to teach these skills that we've been speaking about. And I want to be in a classroom again. One day I want to be in a classroom, but my own classroom. And I was so stubborn. I was like, I'm going to have 20 people, because I'm sick of trying to teach 33 kids in 1 hour. And there's no help, there's no support, and there's all this reporting and all this red tape to get through. And I really missed teaching. But I went straight into the online space. I started my business during COVID. And so I went straight into the online space. And at first I was helping teenage girls to navigate high school. And that was right up, I just thought I'll start where I feel confident. And so I helped lots of teenage girls navigate all that is high school for a teenage girl, which is actually, it's a lot these days. And it was beautiful and it was impactful. But I'd noticed I would have these incredible conversations and these great results. And some of the girls were really thriving. For example, they'd be overcoming their anxious thought patterns, and they'd be able to do things that they never thought they could do. And then their grades would improve, which was further, really validating my hypothesis that if we nurture the heart, their grades will take care of themselves, So that was all happening. But sometimes my girls were then going back to the home where they were learning these anxious thought patterns, where they were being taught to, look at themselves in the mirror and beat themselves up. Or they'd come home from school and go, lovingly, these mothers who meant that they had good intentions, but it would be like, you know, the kid gets in the car and it's like, what did you get in that score in your test? Oh yeah. And what did Sally get? And so it's that instant comparison. And I was like, oh no, this is, you know, not quite going to have the impact I was hoping for. So I moved to helping the women and doing mindset coaching for women. Business started to really take off, and I kept just going because the money was coming and I was, you know, doing all the right business things. But about a year ago, I was like, you know what? I'm lonely. I'm so lonely. I've ticked the business boxes. The accountant's happy. The bank account's happy. My soul was so sad because I went from 200 kids in and out of my classroom all day and a staff room and, you know, after work drinks and Christmas carols with my kids after school. And I'm such an extroverted person. To go from that to sitting in an office on my laptop most of the time, I didn't realize it was kind of like a boiling frog situation where the frog doesn't realize it's being boiled to death until it's too late. And yeah, 3.5, 4 years into my business, my husband goes, I think that you're lonely. I don't think this is you. And that just, it seemed so obvious, but I hadn't realized. And so
what was your first reaction to that?
Honestly, I think it was sadness. It was sadness because I hadn't realized. And I also, when you're a mindset coach, there is a lot of ego work that you've got to like, no, I'm not, I'm fine, I'm great. And there's truth to that. I was great. Life was good, but it was just something was missing. And so there was a bit of sadness, a bit of ego, and then the fear of completely pivoting business when business is doing well, you know, that brings up its own fear. But I had to. So I completely pivoted. I launched the Mind School, oh gosh, only like 7 or 8 months ago. And I said, I'm doing the unbusiness thing to do. I'm capping it to 20 students per round because that's what I wanted. It's in person. I'm not going to make it online so it's accessible to everyone and uncapped potential with finances, all that. Threw it in the bin and launched it, and it just went off. Like, it sold out. We went to different states to teach it. The news was starting to ask questions. The TV crew rocked up when we were last doing it because we were getting such insane results. But I truly think it's because I started to do what I wanted from the beginning. And so it's been a journey, but it's great. It's the best.
Yeah. So what were the main reflections from a school perspective and your kind of experience as a teacher? How has that kind of shaped your philosophy with the Mind School?
Oof, that's such a good question. I think as the teacher, and the teacher in me always sees things from a perspective of how can I make sure that every student in front of me is accessing this, and how can I be so aware of the fact that I'm teaching one curriculum but there's 20 different perceptions, there's 20 different ways that this curriculum is being perceived depending on the human in front of me. So I've always got that sort of in the back of my mind when I create the curriculum, and I make it very accessible for everyone. I've had people that are like, Breanna, I have ADHD. I don't know if I can sit in your classroom for 6 days. And I'm like, don't worry, so do I. And I've got this whole background of being able to make it really accessible for everybody. I think I saw a lot in the system where sitting at a desk for 6-7 hours straight, you watch the kids start to look out the window and yawn, and they're starting to slouch. And I was like, you know, that sounds boring to me. So I have a very immersive up and down, move from your seats, all of that kind of thing. But ultimately it's about safety, because my main lesson as a teacher who I got really incredible academic results, but that was because I cared for my students' hearts. I didn't care about their grades. And so what I learned from that is students will get the most out of you when they feel seen and heard. And I got so many comments from principals and parents who were like, Miss Hunter, she just gets my kid. Like, she just gets him or gets her and he actually wants to be in her class. And I was like, that's not because I care about their grades. It's because I hope I made every kid feel like they matter and they're safe to bring whatever they want to me without judgment. And I think that was the main lesson from being a teacher that's really impacted the way I teach at the Mind School. I just want everyone in that classroom to feel seen and heard, and that's going to allow them to access the information.
Before we get back into the episode, from time to time you might have a burning question, a guest recommendation, a comment or some feedback, which I always appreciate. If so, I'd love to continue the conversation after this episode, so let's connect. I'm easy to find, but the best place to engage and connect is on Instagram, @TheSteveHodgson. But that's enough from me. Let's get back into the episode. Yeah, and if you look at students that go to school, my best marks and best kind of results were from teachers that I liked. I go back to, Mr. Kelly, who was my English teacher in high school, right? And Thursday afternoons in English, one lesson a week was 40 minutes of meditation.
Really? What a cool teacher.
Now, I graduated 23 years ago, right? But the key thing is I remember that, right? And it wasn't Mr. Kelly, it was Mr. Costello, but Charles Costello, and he used to do meditation, and that was brilliant, right? Now, and I just did a meditation course recently, and I've got a couple of meditation retreats that I'm attending next year. But for me, I remember that, but I performed the best in those classes where I felt connected and I actually felt understood. And also I felt like the teacher wasn't just there to tick a box of working, 9 to 5, although teachers don't work 9 to 5. Teachers kind of work before and after and on school holidays and all those kind of things. Although, and that's the thing, I've got a niece now who is a teacher, and she's you look at the classrooms, and she's junior, but she says, you look at the classrooms and you go, oh, wow, these classrooms look so amazing. And she's like, that's because they've come in on their days that they're not getting paid for to put up all the decorations and to decorate their classrooms to increase and improve the environment for their children. They're not getting paid for that. That's extra effort, right?
But it's so important because it builds rapport with your students, and there's so much to it. I actually remember, as you're talking about Mr. Costello, I went to a conference once for teachers, and the question was posed to a whole stadium full of teachers: is it a teacher's job to be liked? And that created some incredible conversations, and I was very much on the side that yes, it is. It actually is. And not many people agreed with me. But I thought exactly what you said. If the kids, look, they don't need to love you, but they need to respect you. But the kids, when they like you, and all it takes for them to like a teacher is to know that that teacher cares about them, gives a shit, shows some interest. How was your footy on the weekend? Did you win your grand final? I used to go watch my kids' grand finals on the weekend because A, I cared, and B, it made my life easier as a teacher because they were like, me, so excited, so happy, so well behaved, and they wanted to be there. They wanted to be in my classroom. And for that reason, I agree that I agree to my own self back then that yes, it is a teacher's job to be liked, and building rapport is, again, a skill that can be taught but isn't taught also when you're learning to be a teacher. Nowhere in the curriculum do they teach you communication skills and rapport building skills. And that's, again, a skill set that should be taught to educators so that kids can also learn this. Because I've seen some incredible, smart educators who know lots about the curriculum, but they actually butt heads with the students and don't know why. And I think it really is a skill to be able to build rapport so that we can help clients, students, colleagues, team members, people. If you're a boss, if you're a leader in your home, if you're a leader anywhere, we need to know how to build rapport so that we can influence people in a positive way.
Yeah. And I think if I look at teachers that back, 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago when I was at school, if I think back to then, I actually think some of the teachers and the teachers now, I think some might even be listening, but I think there's teachers now and there's teachers back then. They actually worked out how to hack the system a little bit, whereas they went, okay, I know the key things I need to do, but I've actually got the courage to be myself and instill my thoughts and how I want to be seen as a teacher and how I want to, my classes, I want them to be more of an experience than just tick and a flick, walk in, walk out, do a test, right? And it's really about having that courage. And then, you talking about the mind school, your students in your mind school is really about having the courage to be themselves and actually find what their power is in and find their passion and find their purpose. Because if they can find that, and, I know it's the old quote, which is like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life and stuff like that, right? But it is true, because if your business and what you do, you enjoy, you jump out of bed each morning and it ignites you, and a lot of people they're not being ignited. They're just still sitting there. I was talking to a coach recently and he was saying he was working with one of his clients, and the client was a lawyer and he was about 38 years old. And he was saying, like you just don't seem happy. What do you want to do? And he says, I really wanted to, work in a different industry. But he basically worked out through some questioning was that he was being a lawyer because his dad expected him to be a lawyer. And he got to the age of 38 and he was like, I'm just doing this because it was expected of me. And it's actually not really what lights me up anymore. I'm just running through the routine of it. It's not, and like life's too short, right? Like I was thinking about it yesterday. If you want to know how short life is even if you live to the maximum age that we can live, right? Go and walk around a cemetery and see the people. There's people that have died young. There's people that have died old. But we are like a speck in history, right? Like our life is a speck. Why would you spend time doing something that doesn't light you up and doesn't ignite you? Because you're just going to live. And as you were saying, you're going to be sitting there on your deathbed, kind of regretting the things that you've done rather than saying, wow, it's just amazing what I achieved and the impact that I had and the people I connected with and the environments and the travel and the drinks that I drank and the food that I ate and the sand that I had my feet in and the waterfalls that I kind of swam in, like all these different experiences. Like that's how you want to be sitting at the end of your life, not sitting there going, how much money's in my bank account and, oh, wow, I've got this big mansion and I've got all these sports cars. And hey, I'm not saying not to have those things. If you want to have those things, that's great. But we know that health is far bigger than wealth. Like you can have all the wealth and we've seen it, right? Like Steve Jobs, rich as, right? But it couldn't help him from his health perspective.
No, it's huge. And have you read the book, Top 5 Regrets of the Dying?
I haven't, but I've heard about it.
Oh, that book, honestly, talking about profound books that can change your life. I'll never forget reading that, sobbing every chapter. And it's this lady who she worked at a hospice and she interviewed, so many conversations with people at the end of their life. And she really found this theme that there was the top 5 regrets. And I remember the top 2. I think one was, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, which, as you're speaking about the people who did law because maybe their dad I can resonate with that. I did law. And if I'm honest, I think that it looked impressive and my dad was super proud of me for doing my law degree. And, I loved that, but I didn't love it for me. And so I have since worked with lots of lawyers who are wanting to leave, but need the courage to leave because it takes a lot of courage to leave that space. But yeah, the first one was that I wish I'd lived a life true to myself. And the second one was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And that's one that I really have to remind myself of because I do love my business. My business is my passion. You talked about passion and purpose. I really feel like my business gives me so much purpose. It lights me up, and I actually need to be disciplined to not work, because that in itself, although it is my purpose, although it is my passion, I also have a husband. I also am a sister. I also, want to have kids one day and need to go to the gym and nurture my friendships, and I want to travel. So I think it actually takes a lot of discipline these days to work less.
Actually, I was just thinking, Breanna, when you were saying, about that book, one of the episodes that I did earlier on in the year, and you should go back and listen to it because you'd love it, was with a good friend of my mum's, Linda Kavalin Popov, and she is the one of the founders of the Virtues Project, and she did some work in a hospice, so she has some reflections around that. But her whole thought on humanity and the world and why she founded the Virtues and like just her whole view on things, you would just love that episode.
I will be going back to listen.
Because she lives on the Cook Islands now, on a island of Arataki, and with her husband, and she is just the most beautiful human. And I want to go over and visit. My mum's a Virtues facilitator, a life coach and everything like that, but just an absolute beautiful human being. And really, she's sat down with heads of government and, kind of different people in different high positions over time. And it's all around, well, what virtue do you need in this situation, right? And she talks, one of her stories you'll hear when you listen to the episode is around, being in a hospice and, she's dealing with a guy and he was, kind of on his deathbed, and he was saying, I regret that I haven't spoken to my brother. We've had conflict and, it really saddens me. And she said, well, do you think you're a man of courage? And he goes, oh yeah. And she's like, well, pick up your phone. And he was like, oh, I don't think so. And she's like, and he rang his brother, and his brother flew in to join him and held his hand as he passed away. But they laughed, they joked, they talked. You got the goosies there, didn't you?
Goosebumps.
Yep. So, and she tells them far better than I did, but and I'm kind of getting teary here as well, but it just, and this is the whole thing around sharing these stories and reflections and just sharing the thoughts of people that have been through things, people that have experienced things, because it's just, you kind of, as you said, between 0 and 7, you're a sponge, right? But we should never stop being a sponge. We should be a sponge our whole life where we just keep absorbing information. And it doesn't mean we have to take it on all the time. It doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but it's really about soaking it all in and going, yeah, that resonates with me. I'm going to use that. Or, and for me, it's always, if one person gets one thing from this podcast, then my job is done, right? If it gets them to pivot, if it gets them to make a change, if it just makes a difference in their life, then my job's done.
That is so beautiful. I think looking through that lens too of virtues and values, that's really I think that's it. I think that's where we need a little bit of a paradigm shift.
It's so simple though, Breanna. It's so it is so simple. My mum and I share a Virtues pick. You can do it online. Yeah. I'll send you the link. But we do a Virtues pick and we talk about, well, what does that virtue mean to you today? What is that trying to tell you in this moment? What's the universe trying to tell you in this moment? Where is it trying to lead you? But it's also about self-reflection, right? Self-reflection is the biggest thing, as we were talking about earlier. And, I know it's a big part that is played in the Mind School, and what you teach is getting people to reflect on themselves,
Absolutely. Oh, is this something that you've taught your sons?
The virtues?
Yeah.
Well, they're cool teenage boys, but I'll give you an example though. There's actually some cards, they're called harmony cards. And
I know the one.
Yeah. And my 17-year-old, he was going through some behavioural issues, not big behavioural issues, but just, struggling with boy stuff, probably when he was in year 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And my mum said, well, how about we each day do a harmony card pick, and he would pick 2 cards and he would go, oh, I got friendliness and I got love. And I'd be like, okay, so how are you going to use those today, right?
Yeah.
And then we would talk about it, right? And it would actually, it did help him, because I would say in the afternoon then, I would say to him, hey, how did you use your courage today? Or how did you use friendliness? Or how did you use helpfulness? Or whatever it was, right? And it just got that dialogue, right? He's in year 12 now, right? I don't say to him every afternoon, so how did you use your courage today, right? Like,
he's like, Dad, I just want to go and drink Passion Pop and go to Levers.
Luckily, he doesn't actually like alcohol, but anyway, that may change. But it's just, I don't know. It's just, I think we overcomplicate life, and I think we need to simplify it in so many ways. Like just asking a question, like going back to the Soul Degree retreats, where Chris would hand out like a pack of cards and you'd do a pick, and the question might be, who in your life has had the most impact, right? And then you would just tell the story of the impact of that person had while you're sitting around a campfire in Vermont. It's like 10, 11 o'clock at night. Fireflies are just flying around. Someone's strumming the guitar, and it's simplified life.
Yeah.
We overcomplicate things too much, and then we overcomplicate it for our kids, and our kids will overcomplicate it for their kids. And if we don't change the cycle, if we don't teach some of the things that you're teaching, some of the things I'm passionate about, there's so many amazing people coming through at the moment in the coaching space and really want to affect change. And I really think we are making a difference. And I think it was interesting. I shared a video a couple of days ago that someone shared from America. Yeah. And obviously with the election happening and going on. And by the time this episode comes out, we'll have a result and everything like that. But, it was a story about a guy talking about his dad around the Vietnam War. I don't know if you've seen it. And he talked, I'll share it with you later anyway, but he was just basically talks through never lose humanity. Like you can watch the media and you can let governments and you can let journalists talk to you and give you what they think, right? But at the end of the day, I actually think the majority of human beings are good, caring, loving people. But we watch stuff on TV, we watch stuff in the news, and the problem with that is that then we go out with this predetermined, kind of notion that there's bad people in the world, that people don't care, that people don't love, that people aren't there to help you. And some of this is where we need to shift it from a mental health perspective. And I'm a mental health first aid instructor, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, because it's very easy if you're going through mental struggles and mental health challenges, plus you've got this pressure of media and journalism and how everything's not good out there and it's all negative. Well, it just adds extra pressure, and you wonder why people are, choosing, kind of a long-term solution to a short-term problem.
Absolutely. And I used to really feel for teenagers feel deeply. They're really in that social justice sort of, a lot of them at that age, they're figuring out what their values are. And so often they would come to me quite scared, really scared for the world. And I was like, no wonder. If I watched the news, I would be an anxious mess. There's no way I'm tuning into that. And it's concerning, and it's beautiful to know that there's things out there, like you just said about the harmony cards. Just imagine, I say this to anyone who will listen, it doesn't even need to be the biggest shift. But if you could spend 10 minutes before you start your class or start your meeting with your team, or before you launch into what are we doing with the kids next week, how's your heart feeling today? Those tiny monumental shifts that bring us back to connection. And like you said, connection as soon as you said by a fire, my soul was like, yes, just by a fire. Take me to the beach, put me in nature. Let's chat about how you're actually feeling. All of a sudden, all that stuff that we're meant to be afraid of, we forget it exists.
Yeah. Because what it does is that by asking questions, by having those environments, by getting that question on a card or picking a virtue and talking about what it does is it actually gets you to think deeper rather than just the normal routine and habit that you go through, just the treadmill of life. It actually gets you to think, and it actually gets you to hack and almost puts your mind on a detour.
Pattern interrupt. Yeah, pattern interrupt.
I've got to go deeper here.
Yeah, and I there's something like 90% of our thoughts. So we think on any given day, the research, obviously it's very hard to prove this, but from all of the studies I tried to find, the number was anywhere between 60 to 90,000. So on any given day, most adults have 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day. And I was like, far out, that's crazy. I wouldn't have guessed that. We're not consciously aware of them, right? But what I found really interesting to second that is that 90% of those thoughts are repetitive. So we're actually, like you said, we're thinking the same thoughts. Usually the alarm goes off. The first thought is, fuck, or like, what have I got to do today? That's usually what have I got on today? What have I got to do today? And then the repetitive thought train just continues. And we become what we repetitively think about. We become, because it becomes our mood and then it becomes our personality. And I always say to my clients, to change how you feel, to change how you show up in the world, we need to interrupt our thought patterns. But if we're not even consciously aware that we're running this, it's been hit on repeat, our thoughts all day, every day, all day, every day. So we think the same, we feel the same, we act the same, we get the same results, and we wonder why nothing's changing. Those cards, those questions, those really profound little micro moments throughout the day, it's a pattern interrupt that can change all of our wiring if done intentionally. And I think that's just so powerful.
Yep. And they can actually have real emotive responses, because sometimes, you'll get a question or you'll reflect on something and it'll take you back to something, or it'll take you somewhere where you've kind of probably packed it away, kind of in this mental storage cupboard, and something's kind of come out and it's kind of triggered something, and you're like, ooh. And most people then go, okay, cool, put that in put some sticky tape more around it and just hide it away even more. But no, it's not. If something comes up like that, if it creates that emotive response, you need to actually go, no, let's rip this open and let's get this out, and because that's just part of a weight that is holding you back and holding you down and stopping you from actually, kind of fulfilling, and you talked about fulfillment earlier, like actually feeling fulfilled and actually feeling that there's no weight or pressure to be someone that you're not.
I love it. I think we need I like the idea of aiming for fulfillment, but I've sat with that too, because a lot of my clients say, Breanna, I just want to be happy. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, to me, that's not the goal, because happiness is an emotion that we can't feel happy 24/7.
It's fleeting.
It's so fleeting. And so I always push back on that as a goal. We can't aim for happiness, and we can't always aim for fulfillment, because sometimes you've got to be really deeply unfulfilled. I'm so grateful for all of those moments. I sat in the law firm. I sat in another stupid, irrelevant meeting about data that doesn't. All those times I was unsatisfied led me to satisfaction. So I don't even know if that's the end goal that we want to be aiming for. But I think that to be proud is something that I think is a really nice thing to come back to. Am I proud of who I'm being? Am I proud of what I'm creating? Am I proud of how I'm showing up in the world? That is something that I think I try to reflect on quite often, because I understand sometimes I'm not fulfilled doing bank stuff for my accountant. That's not what I'm lit up about. But am I proud of who I was as a CEO in that moment? Am I proud of who I am talking to my team? Am I proud of who I am when my dad calls for a chat? I think that is what really that holds a mirror into our soul and how we're going to feel at the end of our days.
Yeah, I love that. Breanna, talk to me about, obviously the Mind School is 6 days.
Yeah.
And can you just give a bit of an overview of what's the kind of journey and path that you move through over those 6 days? What would someone kind of encounter and experience through that?
Oof. That's a big question. We've had all types. As you can imagine, when you're going deep into these kinds of conversations about what's fulfilling to you and what kind of virtues do you want to live by and what's holding you back, what stories, what narratives, what memories. It's a lot of introspection, and it's a lot of, am I being the person I want to be who's going to create a life that I love? When I started the Mind School, it was really marketed as a coaching certification because it was to help coaches get the most out of their clients. But more and more and more, it's just becoming humans. It's becoming parents, corporates, leaders, all sorts of people.
Well, we're all coaches.
Sorry?
We're all coaches.
That's it. And that's that was my profound marketing moment. I thought, I just need to help people to understand parents are coaches, leaders are coaches, everyone is a coach in some way. If we define a coach as somebody who helps someone to get the best out of themselves. So we break it down into 3 core modules, and we start with mindset and NLP. And I sort of describe it as, in the coaching space or the personal development space, it's like I see it as a spectrum. And you've got on one side of the pole, if everything's in polarity, one side of the pole, you've got like the masculine, the mindset, the goal setting, the taking action, the reframe your thought, change your state, very Tony Robbins vibes, which is great and powerful and life-changing and incredible. And if we live on one side of that polarity, it can be toxic, because what we can do is bypass our emotions, and we can suppress our emotions in order to get the goal done and to keep moving and to keep taking action. And I lived on that side of the spectrum for quite a while, and I probably coached from that space too, because I love mindset, I love goals, I love getting stuff done. And then I realized, there's more to this, because people would self-sabotage and people would write the goal but not follow through, and there was more underneath it. So on the other side of the spectrum, we also have emotional embodiment. And emotional embodiment is processing emotions, regulating our emotions, doing the central nervous system work. We do a bit of shadow work in there as well, which is often around releasing shame. And that is usually what's creating the sabotage that stops the mindset work from even landing. And so we kind of go between those 2 poles in the polarity. And then over the top of that, we do influence and rapport, because like I said, I believe that leaders need to understand rapport, and that's a skill. So through those modules and that curriculum, we're using it all to have a lot of introspection. And although I say you walk away with an incredible coaching toolkit, what I love to hear is that there's been marriages saved, relationships with kids that have never felt closer, sometimes leaving unfulfilling careers and going for the courageous route and doing something completely new. And ironically, I never sell or promote it as anything that's going to, impact your bank account and take you to the next financial level or career level. That's not, because to me, that's just not what it's about. But it's very interesting to me that that's a lot of the byproduct. We have people who get promotions and people whose businesses start making more money. And it's just a byproduct of being someone who acts with courage and being someone who's aligned in their values and being someone who can have tough conversations and being someone who can go to the boss and say, I'm feeling undervalued, and I, speak from the heart. So it's a very transformative 6 days, and no 2 transformations are the same.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And just the energy and the confidence that comes from aligning to who you are, what you're meant to be doing, your passion, your purpose, and feeling like that you can have the courage to actually be that person. The byproduct is always going to be you are, the universe is going to deliver things to you because you are in alignment like that. So that's awesome. It sounds exciting. It sounds like a powerful 6 days.
It's very powerful. And, as you were talking, I was like, I'm going to hit Steve up, because I've had so many requests from often the women who graduate. They're like, Breanna, please do Mind School for Men. Please do Mind School for Men. My husband needs this. My brother needs this. And even a few of my male clients have said to me lately, when can the men come to this thing? And I'm like, well, when I find myself a Steve.
We will have to connect.
Yeah, I love what you're doing.
It's one of those things I've been connecting with, obviously Soul Degree and everything like that. But I haven't wanted, probably I've been sitting on it for probably a couple of years now, talking to my brother about it. And it's like finding the right fit, and not just finding something. For me, it's got to be something that really is right. It's not just something just to put put a program out there to make money. Like for me, and obviously I'm really good friends with Chris Robbins now, and he plays full out with the group of 12 of us, right? Like every retreat that he attends, and he does 2 to 3 a year, he plays full out himself. He answers the same vulnerable questions. He talks about challenges in his life. And I think from a facilitator and from a leader perspective in that, you have to do that. That's why in my mental health first aid courses, the biggest things that I get, the feedback I get from the surveys is people say, Steve's an engaging style, his own lived experiences and the stories that he connects with and he opens up about. You know, like if I just taught the mental health first aid stuff just from front to back and didn't include some of that lived experience stuff and also extract and engage with the participants to get their lived experience out, it would be boring as batshit. It seriously would be, right? It's good stuff, but it's actually not the content. The content is kind of that conversation starter. It sparks the conversations that actually provide the bonuses to the content and actually makes the content more relatable and actually impacts people far more.
Yeah, it's the real leadership quality, and leadership is I'm here with you, I'm next to you, beside you. I actually remember a profound day, you know, as the trainer, as the teacher, I was teaching about mindset and emotional intelligence, and I've been, you know, it's a private thing, but I share in safe circles. I've really been struggling a lot the last 2 years with my fertility journey. And I was on day 3 of the Mind School. And every day at the end of the day, all the students did their reflections and they shared their biggest takeaway. And there was one day I walked in and it was funnily, maybe divine, maybe, I don't know what happened that day, but I was about to teach emotional embodiment. And with that comes vulnerability and shame. And I also got my period that day and I was really expecting to be pregnant that month. And I just burst into tears in front of the class and I said, I'm feeling so tender. I'm heartbroken. I'm hearing all of these mothers tell me how much this course is making an impact on them and their kids. I'm hearing about Breanna, you know, we wish you could do this in schools. I do everything for kids, really, you know. I couldn't teach without letting it out. I was just really emotional that day. And that felt so vulnerable because I was thinking, God, I'm their teacher. I'm, you know, God, is this going to bring it all down? La, la, la. And the reflection from that day from everyone, from their takeaway was, I found it so deeply inspiring and empowering to see you have a human moment. And I'll never forget that. That was the first time I ran the Mind School and I thought, far out, that's a bit of a call for me and an invitation for me just to keep that in mind, because it can be so easy to reveal the highlight reel on social media, and there's a time and a place for privacy and vulnerability. I don't think everything needs to be aired in a public arena, but it was just such a nice moment for me to remember that it's our humanness that connects us and creates safety in these spaces. And I think that that's something every coach needs to remember, because the online space can be quite ego driven and that's not real leadership.
Yeah. And I think like the tagline for this podcast when I started it over a year ago was, when we share, we empower ourselves, not just ourselves, we empower each other, right? Because when you share, like you in that moment it would have given someone else courage there that said, I can open up, I can go deeper, I can share my story, I can show emotion. So I love that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you, Breanna, what's one thing that you haven't fully understood about yourself or learned about yourself yet? And, you know, what's your next step on your growth journey?
This is a really cool question, and I'm going to answer it in a weird way. I've struggled with stillness because I'm that, like I said, I like to live on the go, 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 do, get shit done. And because I am really living my purpose now, I find it hard to slow down, but that's my work to do at the moment. And especially as I, you know, call in being a mum, I know that my next season is a lot slower and a lot more still and a lot more of that surrender and that energy. So I've been really trying to understand why I have so much resistance to meditation. And that's something I've been working on. I know you just said you're doing a meditation course next year. I'm diving into that at the moment. That's my area for growth, is to really sit for quite a while in stillness and silence and not feel it.
Yep. Yeah. I did my course and I'm doing a retreat actually here at Kingscliff with Tom Cronin, who I connected with, who I interviewed on the podcast probably a month or so ago. And yeah, it's phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, I think I went to a retreat on the weekend actually, and I had a aha moment because we did 15 minutes of singing mantras, and that was my meditation. So I had this profound moment where I thought, oh, when you sing a mantra, you're just singing for 15 minutes, but your analytical mind is gone because you're singing.
Yeah.
So that's, I think I'm going to look into that as well.
Yep. And also, like, I just did my course and I actually got my own personal mantra. So you actually get your own personal mantra based on your age and those kind of things, which is pretty cool. So then you've got your own mantra that you can kind of use. Breanna, I wanted to ask you, how do you define success?
Success is living a life that you're proud of and that you won't have regrets on your deathbed.
Yep. And how has it changed through your life?
I think when I was younger, success was very ego driven. It was a fancy degree, hence the law degree. To be honest, it was the fancy degree, the fancy cars, the followers, maybe fame, maybe popularity. I think that was my metric of success. And yeah, every year that I grow, every year that I gracefully age, it's way more about how my soul feels.
Yeah, that's awesome. Breanna, throughout your life, who's been your greatest teacher?
Oh, the first thing that comes to mind is my mum and dad. And it's so funny, when I first ran the Mind School, I actually had the moment where I realized the curriculum is the best parts of both my mum and my dad. My dad was an athlete, like a coach, a sports coach, very mindset heavy, the greatest muscle to train is your brain. If you can train your brain, you can do anything amazing. My mum was the emotional embodiment, kind of feel your feelings, talk about all of that. So I was so blessed to have those two skill sets from both parents. And I think that's why I knew inherently that both were important. But in my adult years, I would actually say my first mentor who changed the whole trajectory of my life, and that was Bob Proctor. Bob Proctor came into my life by accident, and at first I rejected everything. It's so funny. I'd spent all this money, and then I got into his first module, and it was all this language about God and universe and I had rejected spirituality because I was, whole story there. I was raised in a Catholic church, and I thought, oh, that's too dogmatic, that's too restrictive. I rebelled, spent all this money on Bob Proctor, and they say that the people who trigger you the most will teach you the most. Bob Proctor changed my whole life, and he opened me back up to spirituality. He opened me up to mindset. He opened me up to a higher being or something that's working with us. And that belief system, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. It's irrelevant because the belief creates the fact. And so having that perspective that there is always something higher working with us and for us, I feel like that really changed a lot for me.
Yeah, life's not happening to you, it's happening for you.
Love it.
Breanna, for those that want to connect with you, that want to find out about the Mind School, just check in with you, have a chat, connect, what's the best way for them to do that?
That would probably be my podcast, which is the Mind School podcast. And I rant and rave in all sorts of ways on there. I have a lot of passion and a lot of rage that comes with that. I also have my Instagram page, which is where I hang out the most and always open to some DMs. That's I am Breanna May.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. And we'll put that in the show reel notes as well. So I appreciate your energy and your time today, Breanna. You are an incredible woman doing some incredible things. And I look forward to continuing to connect and seeing how we can collaborate into the future.
Oh, 100%. And thank you. This work that you're doing for men in particular, it's very needed and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, all good. All right. Thanks, Breanna.
Bye.